Greetings, I'm Thomas Caldwell of the Aurelian Column, and this is a supplemental report following the results of Election 24. Something about criminals that a lot of us appreciate is that they tend to be very stupid, really stupid, in fact. They get caught most of the time, at least if they're pursued properly. They always make mistakes, and they always leave clues as to what they did. Now, mathematics is one of those things that's hard to beat. But if you look at some numbers from the years 2012, 2016, and this year, 2024, you're going to see something interesting if you look into the popular vote of people who voted for the Democratic presidential candidate of those 3 years. This year, the numbers are still coming in, but they're pretty much on par. In 2012 and 2016 and this year, a bit more than 65 million people voted for whoever was running for president in the Democratic slot. But 2020 was different. In 2020, it wasn't the standard 65 million people or thereabouts that voted for the Democratic candidate. It was more than 81 million who voted for Joe Biden. 81 million. Wow. This year, it was just another 65 million who voted for Ms. Harris. Wow, isn't that interesting? Nearly 20 million people suddenly popped into existence in 2020 and then vanished without a trace. Their ballots were there, maybe they weren't. You see, this is why so many of us are quite convinced that the 2020 election was a fraud, because nothing is proving it more than the popular vote records of this year. Nothing. There were so many reports at the time. I'm not going to rehash all that. It's not really worth it at this point. The one thing I want to point out, though, is that more than a few people were involved in it. In fact, at the time, one of the interesting statistics that popped out was a few days before the election, the number one search term in some places on the internet, in search engines, was something along the lines of penalty, election fraud, criminal. People were interested in what could happen if somebody gets caught in the process of fraudulent activity during an election. As I said, criminals leave traces of their crime behind. Now, I don't know who's listening to this, but let's assume that some people out there that were involved in the shenanigans of 2020 are hearing me. Guess what you people are responsible for? Well, not just the bad economy, the mismanagement of the COVID crisis, which cost businesses to go out of business, hundreds of thousands of them. Millions of people suffered. Many died. A lot of suicides when people lost everything. Marriages destroyed. Families shattered. Wow. You really did a good job there, didn't you? Oh, and let's not forget foreign policy. The war in Ukraine. At one time, a lot of American presidents, including Trump, were very big on preventing wars, but no, Joe Biden pushed that one along, took hundreds of millions of dollars of American taxpayer money and poured it into that horrible, horrible meat grinder that cost the lives of, 1 million people? Oh, the weapons manufacturers made out pretty well, though, I guess, but what about in the Middle East? Oh, yes, money went to Iran. Iran was broke. They didn't have money to pursue all the nonsense that was going on there that eventually led to the flaming up of the problem in Gaza with Israel. They paid for that, or I should say you paid for that. See, this is why it's wrong for people to take on the responsibility of the ages. When you decide to throw an election, when you decide to try to assassinate somebody like what happened to Mr. Trump this year. The ramifications could be huge, and they were. I was disappointed by something Mr. Trump said when he gave his acceptance speech. He talked about healing the country. I didn't like hearing that. He made a lot of mistakes in his first administration. Among them is he didn't pursue people who needed to be pursued. Hillary Clinton was one of them. Remember her and her servers and email messages and devices that were destroyed? All that evidence obliterated? He decided, that was attributed to him and his administration, not to pursue her, just let her go. She's learned her lesson. Well, she didn't. And she and all the other people she worked with, Obama, her husband, and Biden, and all these other people have been doing everything they can in their power to trip you up. They did everything in their power to get you out of office. And they've done everything in their power to destroy you and all around you over the last 4 years. Ask Steve Bannon. Ask any of the people who are still cooling their heels in the lockup over the January 6, 2021 incident. A lot of them haven't even seen a courtroom yet. One of the biggest mistakes Donald Trump made in his first administration was to show mercy. Was to show, let's reach out to those I was in conflict with. That's a big mistake. That was a very big mistake. And when I saw the taint of that, let's heal the country. Well, there's something that's going on in this country, and that is that the leftist Marxist establishment that has caused so much mayhem and so much pain and so much insanity, well, they're not going to give up, folks. Don't think for a second that this is over. Resting on your laurels is a bad idea. They are going to double down. I don't know if anybody bothered to watch Kamala Harris's address yesterday when she talked about cooperating and transfer of power. I didn't read that into it at all. That she was talking like a lady holding a dagger behind her back. One of the most loathsome people in the United States right now is the Attorney General of New York, Letitia James. She's the one that's been pursuing Donald Trump, by the way, if you don't know, and getting him in all sorts of ridiculous... anyways, that whole case is something that needs to be examined. It'll probably be thrown out. She did a press conference yesterday, and I would urge everyone to seek it out and watch it. She talked about retribution. She talked about fighting the law. No, she's into something called lawfare. She's into using the legal system to destroy people that she thinks need to be destroyed. It's not generally known, but there was an organization in West Virginia called VDARE. It was an organization dedicated to stopping immigration. Yeah, pretty right-wing viewpoint, but this is in the United States. This is America. People are entitled to their views. And they had nothing to do with New York, but the people in New York in her office decided to pursue them with all sorts of quote-unquote investigations. They basically subpoenaed records. They demanded all sorts of legal things to be done that cost money. Lawyers cost money. If somebody comes after you legally and you are not really wealthy, you are done in this country. You are screwed. And that's what happened to them. They had an unpopular opinion. The people up in New York had nothing to do with West Virginia. They decided to pursue them. Never filed any charges. Never accused them of any crimes, but bankrupted them pretty much with an investigation. That's what they're doing. That's what they want to do, and they're not going to stop. It's very important to realize, everyone, that this battle has just begun. The governor of California, he came out with some interesting statements. Go check it out for yourself. But the worst thing you can do in times when the destiny of nations are at stake, and one of the best examples of what can happen is a guy named Julius Caesar, who literally was resting on his laurels. He was loved by the Roman people. He had been made dictator. It's not the same thing then as people associate it with now in our part of history, he actually was really doing a good job for the Roman people. He really was. But a handful of very petty men who were worried about their agenda and their political power disappearing, in other words, the deep state of the time, conspired, got him into a position where he was not protected, and promptly killed him. His death led to a horrible civil war, and eventually the rise of the Roman Empire, which was not the same as the Roman Republic, and that's another story for another time, but Romans were at their best when they were a republic, if you ask me. I don't know what Julius Caesar was thinking as the daggers were piercing his flesh. People who he had forgiven, former enemies, he thought, people he had defeated and forgiven. But I'll bet you that among the last thoughts going through his mind was, I should never have given quarter to my enemies. You see, Mr. President-elect, Mr. President, healing is a good thing to do. But before a wound can be healed, you first have to clean it out. That's it for today. If you appreciate my podcasts, my written work, my photography, and my poetry and other such creations on my Substack channel, please like and subscribe, share with your friends, and please consider a paid subscription. I also have a fundraiser going right now for new equipment so I can get onto video. You can reach me at the origin of this podcast, which is aureliancolumn.substack.com. You can send me text messages there. You can also reach me by email. My address is feedback@aureliancolumn.com. That's feedback@aureliancolumn.com. I'm on X. I'm there as MICCAMPEN. That's MICCAMPEN. I'm up on Telegram, Gab, a few other places. I'm not on Facebook. Until we meet again, be good, be safe, be vigilant, and remember, clown world must be destroyed. Good day.